The Abel family farm should be one of the safest places to be in a zombie outbreak. It's miles from the city, and the main house itself is built with thick concrete walls and you can grow your own food. So when the roads start filling with abandoned cars and the cities begin collapsing, this is exactly the kind of place people imagine surviving in. And for a while it works. But outside those walls, something strange starts happening. The infected around the farm are getting slower and weaker. It even looks like some of them are dying off. So leaving actually seems relatively doable in this movie. The problem is that the danger isn't only coming from outside. Because while the infected are becoming less dangerous, Francis Abel is becoming more dangerous himself. And that's what makes this movie different from the zombie media I've covered so far on my channel. Usually, the question is whether you should leave before your position collapses. But this movie asks what happens when the refuge works, the outbreak begins easing around you, but the person most dangerous to you is living inside the walls. So today we're going to figure out when the Abel family had to leave the farm. Not when the walls stopped working or when the infected finally became a threat, but when the family farm stopped being a refuge and started becoming the place they needed to escape. And if you haven't seen this movie yet, don't you worry about it. I'll walk you through everything as we go. That way you have full context for each escape window. And I'm kind of excited to break this one down because it's from my homeland, the Philippines. So if you didn't know that, I am actually Filipino. Which is funny because I did a video on the Philippines a little while ago, and there were a few people in there saying I wasn't Filipino. They're all like, oh my god, hindi man siya Filipino nga. Shut the fuck up, bitch. Alright, let's go. Actually, one more thing. If my voice sounds a little bit fried, it's because I was camping with some friends over the weekend, so my apologies. Alright, now let's go. Alright, so window 1, and this is the invisible window. This is the one most people would miss, and you'll find out why very soon. The family has just arrived at the farm after fleeing the city. Francis finds his father dead, having taken his own life. He takes the watch from his arm, and then runs into his mother inside the house, already turned. She's slumped over the wall repeating sorry under her breath. Then she lunges, and he puts her down. After that, he takes them outside and buries them. And this is all within minutes of just arriving at the farmhouse. On the bright side, the property is intact. There's clean water from the pump out front, sugar cane to eat, the van still works, and the barn has live chickens and equipment along with a dead guy hanging from the ceiling. If you can ignore him, things aren't so bad around here. So staying looks like the smart call. Every other populated area would be in complete and total chaos right now, and they've just landed on a property with food, water, and space to breathe. Generally speaking, during a zombie outbreak, you absolutely do not want to be in a populated area. So being out somewhere rural, especially a farm, is a huge advantage. And so far, nothing about Francis is setting off alarms either. He's grieving, but he's focused. He knows the property, and he's trying to get everyone through the first night. Nothing about this situation is pushing them out the front door. And compared to everything they just came from, this is the first place they actually feel stable. At this point, leaving isn't even part of the conversation. And that's why this is the invisible window. Simply put, nobody in their right mind would want to leave after just getting here. And that's why this window is so easy to miss. Okay, so window 2. Francis's wife Iris doesn't want to settle here just yet. They've only just arrived, and if they're going to commit to a place like this, she wants to know what they're turning down first. And I do understand where she's coming from. Once you decide this is home, leaving gets harder. Personally though, if I'm standing on a farm with clean water, chicken, sugarcane, concrete walls, and no zombies beating on the front door, you're gonna have a hard time getting me back into that van. That being said, she convinces Francis that they need to keep moving. So the family loads into the van and drives towards a bridge to the north. They reach the bridge, and this is where looking for greener pastures goes wrong. The path is blocked by barbed wire stretched across the road to prevent vehicles from passing. Iris decides to try and clear the obstruction herself, hacking at the wire with a machete. That's when one of the infected stands up behind her, repeating the words, "Pass, pass," as if it were still checking people through the checkpoint. Francis gets out, shoots it, pulls her back, and things start to spiral. More infected come sprinting in. The kids, still in the van, honk the horn to warn them as the dead surround the vehicle. Francis shifts from clearing a path to drawing attention, firing shots to pull the crowd away so Iris can get the kids out safely. Now it's not about getting through the checkpoint anymore, it's about getting out alive. The family abandons the vehicle and retreats on foot while Francis holds the line. Running out of ammo, he grabs a grenade off a dead soldier and blows the zombies to smithereens. He eventually catches up with his family, but by the time they make it back to the house, their field trip has cost them the one thing that made leaving still possible, the van. Before the bridge attempt, Francis wasn't in control of whether the family left. He could argue or stall, but the van gave them the independence to just get up and go. From that point on, leaving required time, coordination, and Francis's cooperation. He was now in a position to delay, redirect, or shut down any further attempts. So the window here is straightforward. They should have gone back for the van together as a family before Francis went on his own. They knew where it was, they had already made it there once, and if it still worked, it was their way out. One that wouldn't rely on Francis's version of events. But they don't do that. And to be fair, I understand, they barely got out alive. So instead, Francis goes back to the checkpoint alone. He returns with fuel, but no van, claiming the vehicle is broken. Iris does doubt his story, but nobody pushes hard enough to force the issue. Instead of bringing back the van, Francis uses what he recovered to make the house feel more livable again. He boots up the generator, the lights come on, and he plays some sweet tunes for his family. From that point on, the farm starts feeling a little less like a temporary stop and more like home. But shortly after, a stray dog gets into the coop, kills their chickens, and bites Francis. One of their few reliable food sources is now gone. Then Josh picks up a radio signal about a nearby camp. It's thin information, but it's enough to put the idea of leaving back on the table. Francis doesn't see it that way though. That night, he gathers the family and tells them they're staying. The farm has walls, food, water, and enough space to survive. As far as he's concerned, the search is over. The following day, he takes Josh out to learn how to shoot. When Iris asks why, Francis explains that when he was Josh's age, he'd already killed animals. So if they're staying, Josh needs to learn how to survive. It's supposed to be a controlled lesson, but the gunshots draw infected, forcing a chase back to the house. They make it inside safely, and a passing car appears, drawing the remaining infected away. Alright, so let's say you're still here. You missed window 2 by not going back to verify the van for yourself. You're still at the house, you've started settling in, and what you need now is confirmation that the road north is still survivable from somebody who's actually been out there. And this is where the movie gives the family the clearest escape window it's ever going to give them. Francis goes to the river the next morning and finds Diego there. Diego says he was heading north towards a supposed safety zone and stopped at the farm to help. So in one scene, the movie puts 3 things on the table at once: a working vehicle, a route north, and someone who's already been on the road offering to take them. That's the window here. Unfortunately, Francis shuts the whole situation down before the information ever reaches his family. So he pulls a gun on Diego at the river. Diego then leaves a map behind and leaves. Francis comes back to the house with Diego's jacket and tells his family that Diego's dead. And before I continue, there's another layer to this. Diego isn't some random survivor Francis meets at the river. He's actually Francis's brother, and years earlier, Diego had an affair with his wife Iris. So when Diego shows up offering a vehicle, a route north, and a way out, Francis isn't evaluating that offer objectively. The movie's putting this in front of a man who already has a deeply personal reason not to trust this guy. Alright, so now the guide north is gone, and the only version of the encounter the family gets is Francis's version. The one thing still left on the table is the map Diego leaves behind, but Francis tries to burn that. But that's why this is still the clearest escape window in the movie. It's the only time the story lines up transportation, a route, and outside confirmation in the same place. But the family never gets clean access to that information because of Francis. So weeks end up passing, and Francis keeps trying to make the farm feel more permanent. The generator keeps running, a Christmas tree goes up even though it's nowhere near December, and he keeps talking about having another child. As far as he's concerned, they're not waiting for things to improve anymore, they're building a life here. But Iris sees it differently. She points that the infected are getting weaker. She argues they're running low on food and can't stay on the farm forever. When Josh admits he saw the map Diego left behind, Francis brushes it off and insists there was nothing useful on it. By this point, the argument isn't really about the farm anymore. After Diego, every piece of information about the road north comes from Francis. The route, the conditions of the outside world, all of it depends on whether you want to trust the man who already lied about Diego and burned the map. So Diego was the last chance to get information that didn't come from Francis. Alright, so this is where everything gets confirmed. Let's say you stayed through all of that. The map is gone, the door is chained, Diego is supposedly dead, and as far as the family knows, the road north is still too dangerous to travel. Francis has spent weeks making sure that's the version of the world everyone's living in. Then a wounded soldier shows up at their front door. At first, he looks like proof that Francis was right. He's exhausted, injured, and barely able to stand. But almost immediately, his story starts creating problems for everything Francis has been saying. The soldier said his entire squad is dead. So then Francis says he was right, the infected are everywhere. But the soldier tells him no, it depends on where you're going. Then he explains that there are hardly any infected between where they are and the Delta camp. That's the first crack in Francis's story. So the road north isn't what Francis has been describing. Then the soldier reveals something else. He said he probably would have died if somebody didn't help him. Turns out a man found him, pointed him towards the farmhouse, and sent him on his way. And when the soldier looked back, the man was being attacked by infected. That man was almost certainly Diego. And suddenly, another piece of Francis's story falls apart. Diego wasn't dead like he claimed. Iris immediately confronts Francis and says he lied. By that point, the pattern is impossible to ignore. The soldier said the road is passable. The infected around the farm are visibly deteriorating. So everything the family can directly observe points one way, and everything Francis says points the other. And that's the confirmation. Now, the problem is no longer a lack of information. The problem is that Francis has spent months standing between that information and everybody else in the house. Because of that, Francis wants the soldier gone. But his family pushes back. The soldier is injured, exhausted, and has nowhere else to go. Eventually, Francis does agree to let him stay. The following morning, Francis wakes up and heads to the kitchen. The soldier is still alive. Moments later, he asks where Josh is, checks the front door, and realizes that he left during the evening. At this point, something snaps inside of Francis, so he slowly walks back to the kitchen and he one-shots the soldier with a hammer. From here, leaving stops being a survival decision and turns into escaping one person. Now, watch how every beat from now on is the family trying to get out of the house, not out of the outbreak. And just to be clear, at this point, all of your windows to leave have absolutely slammed shut. And Francis is starting to reach a point of no return. We then see him knock his wife out and locks her and Lucas inside the basement. When he was young, his dad used to lock him in there as punishment. And throughout the movie, it actually shows flashbacks of a young Francis behind a closed door and his father standing there in the darkness. Francis spent months convincing himself he was doing something different. He repaired the generator, built the chicken coop, secured the property, and turned the farmhouse into a place the family could actually survive. But at this point, the distinction is gone. He's no longer protecting his family from the outside. He's trapping them inside, the same way his father used to do to him. Fortunately, Iris and Lucas eventually escape through Lucas's plan. The boy fakes a fall, gets Francis to come inside, and while Francis is distracted, Iris attacks him and locks him in the basement instead. We then see Francis having a serious PTSD episode. The family then runs to the front door, gets outside, and runs into one of the infected eating a corpse. It turns out that infected is Diego. And just like the movie established earlier, he's repeating the last word he spoke before being taken over by the infection. He's repeating the word "takbo," which means run. The same warning he was shouting when the infected caught him. So the fact that the infected repeat the last thing that was stuck in their mind before dying comes in clutch here. So he chases them into the house and up the staircase. Fortunately, Francis snaps back to reality when he realizes his family's in danger. So he escapes the basement, gets upstairs, and bludgeons Diego to death with the butt of his gun. Unfortunately, during this entire ordeal, Lucas was bitten. So in a desperate attempt to save his life, Iris amputates Lucas's arm in hopes of stopping the infection from spreading. Then Francis does something he could have done much earlier. He goes back to the van that he knew was fine this entire time, but when he reaches the checkpoint, Josh is already there waiting for him with a gun. Francis tries to speak, but all he can say is Josh's name over and over. Josh, Josh, Josh. And from what we know about the infected, they keep repeating the last word they said before dying, so it's completely fair that Josh assumed he was infected. So he pulls the trigger and shoots. After that, he drops the gun and runs over. He then cries over his dying dad apologizing. Francis looks at Josh one last time, and with his final breath says, "My son." So Josh pulled the trigger on an assumption that he can't check, the same thing that doomed them all. Their inability to verify anything. After that, Josh takes the van and heads back to the farm for his mother and Lucas, and that's where the movie ends. Okay, I did a lot of yapping here, so let's pull it all together. When did you actually have to leave? The strongest answer is the morning Francis met Diego at the river. That's the only moment the movie puts a working vehicle, a route north, and someone who'd already traveled in the same place. But the most realistic answer comes earlier, at the bridge when the whole family should have gone back for the van together instead of letting Francis go alone. Everything after that ran through him, and that's the call that decided it. Alright, so what can we learn from this movie? The biggest mistake the family makes isn't going to a rural farm. In fact, the farm is actually one of the best places they could have ended up during a zombie apocalypse, and the movie proves that, mostly. The biggest mistake they make is gradually giving up their ability to verify things themselves. At the start of the movie, they're still testing assumptions, they're still testing routes, they're still trying to figure out what the world outside actually looks like, but after the bridge incident, that starts to change. Francis lies about the van being broken, and nobody decides to verify it. The road north is supposed supposedly too dangerous, and nobody verifies it again. Diego is supposedly dead, and again, nobody checks. And every time that happens, a little more control over the family's decisions gets handed over to Francis. Meanwhile, the situation outside keeps on changing. The infected around the farm were getting weaker. Diego arrived safely from the north, and the soldier confirmed there were hardly any infected between their location and the camp. The movie kept placing opportunities in front of the family to challenge what they thought they knew, but unfortunately they never follow through. And that's what ultimately destroys them. Not the lack of food, not the lack of weapons, and not the zombies. It's just that the family reaches a point where major decisions are being made based on assumptions nobody is willing to test. And once that happens, those assumptions start turning into facts, whether they're true or not. So by the time the truth finally catches up to them, the map is gone, the house is fortified, Diego is dead, and Francis is the only one who gets to decide what's real and what isn't. At that point, the damage has already been done. You can't survive a dangerous world if you're blind to it, and the second you let somebody else do all the looking for you, you've already given up. So it wasn't the zombies that trapped them, it was the simple fact that they just stopped checking. Alright guys, if you made it to the end, I appreciate that as always, and I actually did a video about the pros and cons of surviving in a farm right here. You can go and check that out. And if you enjoyed this video, consider subscribing. I don't generally ask for this, but it'd be kind of cool if I could hit 100,000 subs by the end of the year. It's unlikely, but whatever. And if you enjoyed this video, I have a playlist of a lot more just like it. Go and check this out. Cheers guys.